This is a British mathematician called Bill Tutt. You won't have heard of him, but in 1943 he pulled off what many believe was the greatest intellectual feat of World War II. It shortened the war and saved millions of lives. He died in 2002 without ever being officially recognised for his achievement. This is a former GPO engineer called Tommy Flowers. In 1944, he turned Tutt's mathematical ideas into the world's first computer. He died in 1998. Chances are, you won't have heard of him either. Backed by the brightest talents of Bletchley Park, they allowed Britain to break a top-secret machine employed by Hitler to dictate the course of the war. This machine was not Enigma. It was something far more secret and significant. And you definitely won't have heard of that.
It was Hitler's BlackBerry, really.
That intelligence probably shortened the war by a couple of years.
They were the forgotten heroes of Bletchley Park.
This is the story of a secret war and how two men changed the world and then disappeared from history. This is Bletchley Park. In 1939, it became the wartime headquarters of MI6. If you know anything about what happened here, it will be that a man called Alan Turing broke the German naval code known as Enigma and saved the nation. And he did. But that's only half the story.
There were three heroes at Bletchley Park. The first was Alan Turing. The second was Bill Tutt, who broke the Tunney system, a quite amazing feat. And the third was Tommy Flowers, who with no guidelines built the first computer ever.
Amazingly, the story of Tutt and Flowers has never been fully told. But then again, Bletchley is Britain's fortress of secrets.
The secrecy about Tunney and about Colossus has completely distorted the history of computing. And it's also left the story of the World War II code-breaking effort incomplete. It's like there's not enough room on stage because the Enigma story has taken up so much space.
It's not surprising that there are stories still to be told about this place. Bletchley Park was Churchill's House of Secrets. It didn't even appear on any map. Nicknamed Station X, this sprawling complex was home to a clandestine army engaged in a shadowy struggle for military intelligence. Bletchley Park's code-breaking history began in 1939, with a tiny attic radio station hidden at the top of the house. It would eventually give its name to the entire estate. Station X. As the war progressed, operations expanded out from the main house to a haphazard collection of huts and concrete blocks. Here, some of the most brilliant minds in the country were involved in a constant battle to learn the enemy's secrets. Arguably, the toughest and most rewarding struggle was against a code called Tunney. In defeating it, Bill Tutt and Tommy Flowers would change the world. Captain Jerry Roberts worked alongside Bill and was involved in the attack on Tunney. He is the last surviving codebreaker from an elite group known as the Testery. Now aged 90, this is the first time he has visited this part of the park since the war.
General Eisenhower said tiny decrypts shortened the war by at least 2 years. In its heyday, the place was really buzzing. Thousands of people working here hard. Very disappointing to see it in this shape.
The Testery were backed by a huge team of people, processing the information gained from the broken codes. And while much of Bletchley has been restored, the places that housed those workers are abandoned. The secrets they uncovered, though, are still coming to light. World War II was a conflict uniquely designed to create secret messages and exploit them.
The rapidity and mobility of armies during the Second World War meant that you couldn't get your fixed line communications, which are much more secure, up quickly enough. So increasingly they became to rely upon radio technology. And radio technology, of course, is broadcast to the world, and they would therefore be able to intercept it. It's a considerable weakness.
If you could break into the right encoding system, then you could deliver victory. That was what Bletchley was built to do, and their most secret and stunning success came against a code which they nicknamed Tunny, and the Germans called Lorenz. Its existence was a tightly guarded secret. Even now it's not common knowledge. Tunny was generated by a new top-secret machine, a device Hitler called his Geheimschreiber, the secrets writer. To understand its genesis and the need for this supercode, you first have to look at the system that preceded it. Enigma. Enigma would dominate the early work of the codebreakers of Bletchley Park, and it was a formidable opponent.
Well, this is an Enigma machine, a type of cipher machine that was used throughout the Second World War by the Germans. Throughout the Second World War, they believed that the ciphers that had been made on this machine could not be broken. If I press the key for letter N, lamp W lights up on this occasion, so N would be in cipher to W. If I release my finger and press N a second time, on this occasion, lamp M lights up. And the reason for that is the rotors at the back of the machine have moved each time I press the key, and that changes the internal wiring.
Enigma masked Germany's wireless traffic. The Morse code transmissions that were monitored back in Britain by Y stations, monitoring and recording stations, operated almost exclusively by women.
On the First World War, there was considerable emphasis put on the quality of wireless receivers. And you might think that the most important thing in wireless is the transmitter, or the medium, the ether through which the message travels. But for the cryptographers, the main thing was the quality of the receiver, being able to pick up the last lingering trace of a message. And that was where the British radio engineers were considerably more advanced than their German counterparts. And the Germans simply didn't believe that their messages could be picked up as far away as they were. They didn't believe that messages from Russia, for example, could be picked up in Britain.
For the first years of the war, those listening posts were dedicated to picking up Enigma traffic. Then, in 1941, a new and strange sound began to be picked out from the ether.
A new kind of music, it was described as by the British listeners when they first heard it.
This strange music was a new coding machine delivering messages not by Morse, but by teleprinter. The information war was about to move into new territory. The advent of machine-made codes had one immediate effect on Bletchley Park. They began to recruit mathematicians.
Mathematicians were regarded as sort of weird, incomprehensible people, and it just wasn't really understood what contribution they could possibly make to code breaking.
These machine ciphers that were introduced, Enigma and so on, and there were others as well, are incredibly complex mathematically. Now, in the First World War, the British code breakers were wordsmiths, people who translated ancient documents, for example, because it was all about words. But in the Second World War, it was much more about mathematics.
The mathematicians were thrown into the front line against this new mystery system. Even though the Nazis believed Enigma was unbreakable, Hitler demanded more security. His style of command called for a new and more direct communications network. It would carry more information and supersede the tangle of Morse traffic which his forces generated.
Enigma was really out-of-date technology by the time the war started. 3 operators were required, and then another 3 operators at the receiving end. There'd be the guy who actually typed the message. The operator would have an assistant who would painstakingly note down the letters as they lit up. And then that would be handed over to a radio operator who would translate that into the dit-dit-dar of Morse code. And then the process was reversed at the other end. So you had 6 people cooperating in the transmission of a single message with Enigma. Very slow, very clumsy.
So the vast volumes of information needed to fight a modern war at that time would simply have overwhelmed a system based upon using an Enigma machine. So they needed something which would cope with the throughput of information that they required.
And this is it. The machine Hitler had dreamed of. The Lorenz SZ-40, or as the Allies called it, Tunny.
This is an example, quite a rare example, of what was called a Lorenz enciphering attachment. Quite a complicated machine. If I lift up the cover and show you the interior, if you count up, you'll find that this device has got 12 wheels in it. The Lorenz was much more sophisticated than Enigma. The operator at one end typed in plain text, and the operator at the other end received the plain text on his teleprinter without any intervention on his part.
The way in which this Lorenz cipher machine worked was it would apply 2 layers, 2 keys to your message. So it wouldn't encipher it once, it would encipher it twice. The first encipher used 5 wheels. Then they would apply a second key, and this used similar 5 wheels, but then it had another 2 wheels that would cause what we could call stutters in the key, and then that would generate a repeat character. And this was in order to try and introduce this apparent randomness into the key.
The 12 wheels made the machine an awesome generator of code, and the number of potential enciphering possibilities multiplied out as 23 times 26 times 29 times 31 times 37 times 41 times 43 times 47 times 51 times 53 times 59 times 61, which equaled 1.6 million billion combinations. Another innovation saw the Lorenz incorporate the natural code of the teleprinter into its basic design.
It's kind of modern binary code, really. It's zeros and ones. And they just took the teleprinter code and they encrypted that.
With the Lorenz enciphering device, the plaintext letter A was changed by a machine which actually added to it a pseudo-random character, for example the letter K, might have been used, for which the teleprinter code was this, 4 crosses and a dot, and these two characters were then combined together by a process which is sometimes called addition, that if the two elements were the same, then the result was always a dot, but if they were different, the answer was a cross. And here they're the same, so it's a dot. And if you looked at that set of impulses in terms of the Standard International Teleprinter Code, you would find that that was in fact the letter N. The letter A has been enciphered to N by adding this random character K to it. Now at the receiving station, of course, the letter N is the cipher message, and we already know that that's going to come in terms of this pattern. And now, a little bit of magic, if at the receiving station the same random character that was used by the sender was combined with it in the same way, adding up, 2 are different, so the results are cross, they're different, the results are cross, same, a dot, these two are the same, it's going to be a dot, and these two are the same, a dot. The result would be that. And if we look back, that of course is the old character A, which is the original plaintext.
The actual number of teleprinters using this code in the new network was less than 30. But they were the lifeblood of the German command, feeding out to the furthest fingertips of the Third Reich's reach. More importantly, as many of the generals needed information about other campaigns as well as their own, one line of traffic could produce an insight into the entire German war effort. This was the prize awaiting the code breakers. To get to it, they had to crack a code no one understood, produced by a machine no one had seen, and with a range of possible encryptions that were utterly unimaginable. To defeat the impossible machine, Bletchley would turn to a 24-year-old mathematician called Bill Tutt. Bill was born in Newmarket in 1917, the son of a gardener at Fitzroy House, a local racing stable. As a child, his keen intelligence soon showed itself. He gained a scholarship to Cambridge and County High School.
After winning the scholarship, Uncle Bill faced the even greater feat of getting to and from the school, which was roughly 12-mile journey there and then 12 miles back again. So he definitely had a lot of determination.
At his new school, he excelled, winning prizes in every subject.
I can imagine he might have been a bit frustrated at the school itself, in that he was apparently so much ahead of all the other pupils. So he'd have been a little bit isolated in that respect, I imagine.
In 1935, he went to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied chemistry and then mathematics. Bletchley's habit of raiding the best academic talent meant that Bill was sent to the park in 1941, although not everyone recognised his potential.
He first was interviewed by Alan Turing and was not chosen to work on the Enigma project. However, that was the best thing that could have happened to Bill. Instead he was chosen by John Tiltman to be part of the research group.
They were the cream of the cryptographic people.
Bill found himself in the right place at the right time, because after months of fruitless examination, the team working on the invincible Tunny code were about to be gifted away in.
At the beginning, the Germans were very sloppy. They obviously had so much confidence in the machine, they were overconfident. And in fact, this is how we came to break the system.
You need depth to break any cipher. By depth, I mean a number of messages sent using the same key or the same system.
30th of August 1941. A German operator had a long message of 4,000 characters to be sent from Athens to Vienna.
What happened is they sent a message and the person at the end said, well, I didn't quite get that, can you send it again?
Operator 1 sent it again, but he didn't change the wheel settings, and so you got what we call the depth. 2 messages with exactly the same encryption.
So he sends the same message on the same setting, and the trouble is then that when he resends it, why he makes slight differences in the punctuation so that the message isn't quite the same as it was.
He abbreviated Nummer, the German word for number, to NR, so he didn't have to type in the UMME every time. And anything he could abbreviate, he'd abbreviate it. A little intercept station picked up these messages. They realised that they were radio teleprinter.
The message was sent to Bletchley via a dispatch rider. When it got there, the first person to attack it was legendary codebreaker John Tiltman. A former frontline soldier in World War I, Tiltman was awarded the Military Cross, but it was his talent for languages that saw him rise through the ranks in intelligence work.
He's generally recognised as one of Britain's best codebreakers in the Second World War. He did achieve quite a lot on Japanese codes, for example, and he taught himself Japanese in just a few weeks. But he looked at this Lorentz cipher, and he was the first to realise that there was a method of breaking through this code.
The Lorentz machine had a particular weakness. If 2 messages were sent with the same key sequence, then there was a way in which the signals could be recovered. Let me show you. We had a message earlier where the plaintext was letter A and the pseudo-random character generated by the machine was K, and the result turned out to be letter N. Now suppose another plaintext message B was sent on using the same key. Then on this occasion, the answer to that in fact turns out to be P. I'm not going to show that, but it's the same procedure as we used before. Now, we saw previously that if you add K to this message, you recover the plaintext. Suppose you add those up. So that on the left-hand side you've got A plus B plus K plus K. Now the elements of those 2 in each case will be identical, and they'll cancel each other out, and in effect the K disappears from the equation. And of course on the right hand side we've got N plus P. N plus P from the teleprinter code is in fact the letter G. And so we can say that if this is what we've got G, the sum of the 2 pieces of ciphertext, and the question is it possible to decompose them? And we decompose that back into the original messages, which were A, of course, A and B. That's what we would like to do. Well, there's no mathematical way of doing it, but one way in which it can be done is to make an inspired guess for one of those answers. Suppose, for example, we made a lucky guess that the first message was just the letter A. then if you take the gene we've got and add A to it, then from the teleprinter code, if you add G and A together, you discover you can get B, the second one. And so if this makes sense, that makes sense, and you've got a result. A second, more convincing example, perhaps, is this one, which is based upon 6 letters, is the sum of, in the teleprinter world, the sum of the names of 2 principal cities in the United Kingdom. And the question is, could we resolve that into the actual names of these cities? And the method they used at Bletchley was based upon intuition and perseverance. For example, if you've got 2 important towns here, it's conceivable that one of them might well be London. And so a good try. And then proceed to add these pairs of letters together using the teleprinter code method I showed you earlier. We won't do that, it'll take us too long, but I assure you that if you do, you'll come up with this result. Now, it might be argued that could have occurred by chance, but it's very unlikely. And so this approach was the one that was used at Bletchley Park to decompose these combined messages. Colonel John Topman would take such a message and he would use a plausible piece of German, something he thought might very well occur at the beginning of one of the messages, add it into the composite and see if something plausible Germanic came out as a result.
Tiltman took 10 days to handbrake and unravel the transmission.
In his extraordinary feat, he manages to extract from this the ciphertext. What was the ciphertext? What was added to the plain text?
It was a phenomenal piece of decryption, but it still didn't help the team understand how they could regularly read Tunny.
He couldn't work out the system, how the machine worked, and the job was passed to Bill Tutt.
Tutt sort of recalls it as this almost an act of desperation. You know, oh well, we can't work it out here, you have a go at it, almost disparagingly, you know. And Tutt sits down and he sees patterns, and he's looking for patterns.
He did put this 4,000 word message into columns and made a rectangle out of it, and he thought about what might be a useful length of this, and then he noticed that there were certain repetitions that went across the rectangle.
He realizes that there seems to be a pattern of every 23 times a rotation. He thinks it might be 25. So he tries multiplying 23 by 25 to see if the pattern extends along that. And it doesn't quite work, but the pattern does extend along 574. So he thinks then, well maybe it's 41, because 41 is the prime number of 574. You wouldn't have a machine that rotated 574 through 574 positions. Maybe it's 41, and he tried it and it worked.
From that, he began to deduce, well, this starts repeating itself after 41 strokes, that you get a certain resonance, that even though it's affected by other impulses, the dominant thing is here the fact that you get this resonance after 41. So he says, well, I think the first wheel in this has 41 spokes, and then he starts working on the second wheel and so forth.
I was working in the same office as Bill Tutt for most of that time, and I can still remember him staring into the middle distance and making accounts on reams and reams of paper, and I used to wonder whether he was actually doing anything. My word, he was. A most extraordinary achievement.
Using Tut's insight and a method known as tauringery, the testarii applied brute mental force to break the code. As they did, it became apparent just what a valuable source of information Tunney would prove to be.
We saw the signatures, and we saw who the messages were sent to, so we were well aware of all that, and they included Field Marshal Keitel, who was the head of the whole German army, which is not a bad start, and Van Jodl, who was the chief of staff of the German, in other words, the chief operating officer, and his number 2, Valdemont. But in 1944 they were joined by a fourth, Adolf Hitler himself.
You almost, in the high command meeting, where they're working it all out, you are almost actually the fly on the wall.
The world's toughest code had been broken. Hitler's secrets were laid bare, and the course of the war was about to change. All because of one sloppy, lazy error by a lowly teleprinter operator.
I think this German operator did us such a huge favour. I think there ought to be a statue of him in Whitehall.
The first chance for Bletchley Park to use Tunney information in the field came at the Battle of Kursk on the Eastern Front. The testarii, the elite group commanded by Major Ralph Tester, was still breaking this impenetrable code by hand. Even so, they had uncovered an incredible amount of information regarding plans for a massive surge by Germany against the Russian forces.
The Tunney decrypt showed that they were about to make a major assault on the Russian lines, and we were able to warn the Russians. But much more than that, we were able to tell them how the attack was planned. It was going to be a pincer attack. And even more astonishingly, we were able to give them the whole order of battle.
It was the Nazis' last chance to put the Red Army on the back foot, but the Russians, forewarned and forearmed, were waiting for them. Kursk was both the largest armoured clash in history and the single bloodiest day of aerial warfare ever. By the end of it, Germany's Russian campaign was in tatters, and the Red Army gained an initiative that they would press all the way to Berlin.
The Russians, of course, called Kursk the turning of the tide.
Kursk proved just how important intercepted Tunney messages could be. The challenge now was to accelerate the decoding process.
I've got a page up here that mentions Bill Tutt, when it says that he invented what's they call the 1+2 break-in method, was invented by William Tutt in November 1942. What Bill did, his first achievement was that he actually diagnosed the machine, the structure of machine and how the cipher worked, purely from intercepted messages. Nobody had actually seen the machine at all. But then his second major contribution, and this was working out a statistical method of cracking the machine. The hand methods that they had used up until then were no longer possible because of extra German security measures and so on, so they were coming to an end of what they could do in cracking these messages. And then Tutt worked out this method.
It was a mathematical and statistical attack on the coded messages, and it required a huge amount of checking and counting of data. Luckily at Bletchley Park, there was a man who had an idea how this work could be done. Putting Bill Tutt's theories into practice would lead to one of the great technological breakthroughs of the Second World War, a breakthrough kept secret for nearly 60 years. It was made by a GPO engineer called Tommy Flowers.
Flowers was a brilliant man. He was quiet, he had a slightly hesitant manner, he looked very boyish, and with his hair perpetually smarmed back with brilliantine, he certainly didn't look like someone who was about to change the world, but of course change the world he did.
Tommy Flowers was born in Poplar, London, in 1905, the son of a bricklayer.
He was born into a Cockney-speaking world, and Flowers kept his accent to a greater or lesser degree right through his life. And he said later in life that his Cockney accent had probably been a handicap to him. His brilliant mind that enabled him to move out of that world into a quite different world.
Like Tutt, he was a scholarship boy, but he would gravitate to industry rather than university. First he followed an apprenticeship in mechanical engineering, before gaining a degree at night school, and then rounding off his education at Dollis Hill, the post office's unique research laboratory in London. Bletchley used the Dollis Hill engineers to help with their attempts to harness machines to the task of code breaking. This is how Tommy came onto the radar of a pivotal figure at the park, the mathematician Max Newman.
He discovered that you could mechanise Tutt's method of breaking this cipher. He understood that it was something that you could put into a machine.
Max's department, called the Newmanry, had built a machine to crack Tunny. Nicknamed Heath Robinson, it kept breaking down. Newman brought in Flowers to fix the Robinson, but Tommy had a better idea.
Tommy Flowers took one look at this and said, I can do that better. What I can do is I can have the patterns generated in electronic circuits. And now I've only got one tape, which is the source tape, the cipher text. And I can read that now at 5,000 characters a second, compared with 1,000 on Heath Robinson. And I can now generate these patterns in electronic circuits. But of course, that meant that he had to have vast numbers of valve tubes in order to do this.
Valves were flaky kind of devices, and the more of them that you had, the greater the probability that a couple of them would be out of action at any time.
But Tommy's practical experience meant that at that time, he knew more about the potential of this technology than anyone else in the country.
He knew that if you left electronic valves running for a long time, then you didn't get problems with them. The problems arose if you kept switching them on and off.
Flowers knew he was right, so he just went back to his laboratory at Dollis Hill and quietly got on with building the all-electronic machine that he knew the code breakers needed. It was massive, the effort that was required to do it. Flowers told me that he and his group worked until their eyes dropped out.
Eventually he produces this thing and they try it out and it works first time. Oh gosh, that's luck. So they try it out again and it works second time and it keeps working every time they try it out, and they're so, good grief, and he produces this thing called Colossus, which is, the world's first semi-programmable electronic computer.
this is Colossus. And what it did was, you took the intercepted ciphertext punched onto paper tape, 5-bit code there, and that's received by us on our radio station, punched onto paper tape, and loaded onto this part of Colossus here called the bedstead. That's the part of Colossus which holds the intercepted cipher signal, and that is joined into a loop and being read continuously, and that's being read at 5,000 characters a second. That's the data going into Colossus. They put the results of those readings up onto a lamp panel here, and here are the results of a particular run. So this is refreshed every time the tape goes round one continuous cycle.
We've got one document that was written at the end of the war, a technical description of Colossus 1. It's a sort of technical manual that describes the different types of valves that were used, for example, and the different parts of the machine, the circuit diagrams of the valves that were used in the different parts of the machinery, internal bitstream generators, the clock pulse system and what have you, which were all nowadays are standard parts of any computer, but were all had to be invented for this machine from scratch. The idea from them now, as I say, they've been taken over and used in modern day computers.
As innovative as it was, Colossus would only break the 2 Chi wheels. Decoding Tunny would still be a team effort.
There were 7 stages to the breaking of Tunny, and once the numery was established, the numery handled 2 of them, and the testary handled the other 5.
Bletchley Park's scepticism was immediately cured as soon as they saw Colossus working. They wanted more machines.
A little unrealistically, they asked for 4 more Colossi by the 1st of June, the projected date for D-Day. As it was, Tommy and his team only just managed to deliver 1 more machine, the Mark II.
It was 1 o'clock in the morning on the 1st of June, and Flowers and his men just had to go home to catch some sleep. And Flowers left one of his right-hand men, Bill Chandler, to carry on the fight alone through the small hours of the morning. It was a very tough night for Chandler. He worked on, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, he noticed that his feet were in a pool of water. A radiator pipe on the wall had burst, and water was inching inexorably across the floor towards high-voltage equipment. It was quite dangerous, I think, for Chandler, but he carried on, and eventually, in the wee small hours, he tracked down the fault, and he made some adjustments using his soldering iron, and Flowers turned up a few hours later to find Colossus working perfectly. No one had managed to fix the leaking radiator pipe, though, and the people operating Colossus had to wear Wellington boots to insulate themselves. But Flowers beat the deadline. It was the 1st of June, and Colossus was working. And so both Colossus 1 and Colossus 2 were in operation in time for the D-Day landings.
Tony Decrypts made 2 major contributions to the success of D-Day. The first was to uncover the entire defensive structure of the German army.
The most important information that Lorentz provided for the run-up to D-Day was the order of battle information, which give details of the aircraft, the tanks and so on that were available to the Germans against the D-Day forces. And none of this information came from Enigma intercept, even got details that aircraft are being refitted or moved around and so on. So it had as much information about the German Air Force as the German Air Force itself had.
The other contribution was to eavesdrop on conversations which confirmed that the Nazis had fallen for Operation Fortitude, the fake invasion of Calais.
Hit Hitler had swallowed our deception campaigns. Hitler was convinced the attack was coming across the Straits of Dover and that Normandy was a feint.
His generals, being professionals, wanted it to be in the Normandy region. Hitler won out, so we knew that the Normandy region was less well defended than it could have been.
As the war through Europe progressed, the information gained from the Tunny system began to be used in a more subtle and innovative way. The effect of this flow of information helped us to read Hitler and predict the way he would react and wage war. In modern terms, it helped us to get inside his head, something which up until then had been difficult to do, because Hitler didn't act like a normal military commander.
They had to learn not to think that Hitler would do what they would do, but to understand how Hitler would actually react in these situations and do things that they simply didn't expect him to do, to hang on to territory when it was completely pointless.
And this was one of the amazing things about the war in Italy, which people don't really get or understand. Once the British know from this teleprinter link that the Germans have decided to keep the front going, not only do they know how to shape the immediate battle, but they also realise that they can keep the thing going for as long as they like. They can control the extent to which the battle moves forward, and by doing so can drain away German resources, which won't then be used for the main battle of the invasion of Europe.
This is the great irony of the Nazis' love affair with secrets and machines. The very devices they trusted to give them total security allow the Allies to play Hitler like a fish on a line. From the beginning, though, the Nazis were in the impossible position of having to trust these machines. Machines which would prove to be an Achilles heel.
The Nazi philosophy led them to distrust people and to put their trust in machines. And the problem then is you have to accept the idea that the machine cannot be broken. And in fact all these machines are vulnerable, provided you approach it in the right way. And that is what the British did. And the secrets of Nazi Germany, of Hitler himself, flowed forth because of that. Unlike here in Britain, where we had one code-breaking organisation, in Germany there were 7 different organisations involved in code-breaking, and they spent a lot of their time just fighting one another, even on one occasion actually physically fighting on the street. So they couldn't bring together a mass of people and get the best out of them in the way in which we did in Britain.
Similarly, their ideology meant that they were equally ill-equipped to create their own version of Bletchley Park.
Some people say that it's because the kind of people that worked at Bletchley Park were just, by German lights, unemployable. There were gays like Turing, there were Jews, there were totally disorganized academics, people who were brilliant but practically dysfunctional. They just did not fit into the Nazi ethos.
By May 1945, the war in Europe was over, and Bletchley Park had done its job.
The war costs on average 10 million lives a year. This is not counting the wounded and the maimed. breaking Tunny at that juncture would pretty jolly important.
For Tut, and for flowers in particular, peacetime would bring a unique set of difficulties. During the war, Bletchley operated behind a wall of silence, and thanks to the nature of their work, that secrecy would remain intact for a long time to come.
Even once the war's over, they still couldn't say. So that was a big issue, and the bosses at the time understood that that was a security threat, if you like. So they moved quickly to say to people, sorry, you've got to keep the secret permanently, forever. You can't go home and tell your mother or your father what you were doing. And there are many interesting and quite tragic stories of where people didn't. And right into the 1970s and even beyond, parents died without knowing what their children had done.
As for the machine itself, after the war, Churchill let it be known that Colossus had been broken into pieces. This was not true. At least 2 survived and were taken to the new GCHQ building, where they were used until the 1960s.
It seems very likely to me that the Russians were using Tunny in the Cold War period. As the Russian armies swept across Europe, they captured numerous German Tunny machines, and they very probably reconditioned them and used them for their own communications.
As the Tunny break was being buried, Tommy was recalled to Dollis Hill. While he was there, the Americans announced that they had built the world's first computer, ENIAC, in February 1946. Already the true history of computing was being corrupted. Tommy's suffering in silence was slowly disappearing from history. As for Bill Tutt, he was awarded a fellowship at Cambridge before moving to Canada, where he took up a teaching post and met his wife Dorothea. Bizarrely, for a man who had helped defeat the Nazis with the use of cutting-edge technology, Bill settled in rural Montrose, surrounded by German-speaking Amish farmers. There he continued to do breakthrough work at the University of Waterloo, in a branch of mathematics that was growing in importance, thanks to the rise of computer science.
So he was working in an area of mathematics that wasn't especially fashionable in the middle of the 20th century. But it's the mathematics that underlies much of the theory of computation. So the importance of his work in the field he helped nurture became astronomically important as the information age unfolded in the late 20th century.
Well, all that was rather nice. You see, it meant that in the case of unit resistances, all these determinants were integers, and therefore if you made the horizontal side equal to the complexity, all your little squares and rectangle sides, they all became integers.
Certainly we're talking about a genius, yes, in many respects. I think for what he did at Bletchley, he proved it, and for what he did in graph theory and related parts of mathematics, he proved it again.
Meanwhile, the story of Colossus was beginning to creep out. Tommy at last began to receive some recognition. In 1982, he was invited to talk at the Museum of Digital Technology in Boston.
Hostilities commenced in Europe in 1939, and all civil work in Britain had to be subordinated to war work, in the course of which I was sent to Bletchley Park a highly secret establishment some 50 miles north of London, to take on some top secret work.
He was still consulting with the Ministry of Defence as to what he could say and couldn't say, and it was still, some things were restricted even in the 1980s.
For Tommy, 12 years older than Bill, the gradual lifting of secrecy came too late. Although he did live long enough to see his famous machine rebuilt at Bletchley.
He knew that history had treated him badly, and I had the sense that he was weighed down by all those might-have-beens, how fabulous it could have been if things had gone differently, if only it hadn't been for the secrecy. He also knew and told me that the story was coming out too late for him. It was too late to make any real difference.
Back in Canada, Bill took the opportunity provided by his 80th birthday lecture to finally break his silence on Tunny.
If you know the wheel patterns, when you're being found at death, you can try the first wheel against the first impulse on various... He said that when he finally did tell about it, finally did speak of it, that it lifted an enormous burden. And it's hard to exactly say to the extent to which it may have altered his personality, the personality that I first met him as.
Outside of a select group of academics, however, few people realized the significance of these men's achievements. Bill received the Order of Canada for his academic work, but he was never decorated by his own country. He did, however, gain the most important award he could have wished for.
To become a Fellow of the Royal Society and to sign this charter book, you need to be a leading scientist. You need to convince your peers that your work is good enough. So you are refereed in the same way that a scientific paper is refereed. If you cross that hurdle, Council of the Royal Society will assess you as being a good enough scientist to become a fellow, and if you get over that hurdle, then you become a Fellow of the Royal Society and you sign this very fine book. It helps if you have a Nobel Prize tucked away somewhere.
In 1987, Bill signed the book. He joined an illustrious group: Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, Winston Churchill, and William T. Tutt. Other names in the book are Alan Turing and Max Newman. Tommy's name was never entered in it, although one of his many awards does show the effect of the revolution he helped begin.
When personal computers came in the 1980s and 90s, he bought a PC, tried to work how to use it, and had difficulties, so he enrolled on a course at the local college to learn basic information processing, and he got a certificate here which shows that he passed an introductory course in information processing, so he learned how to use programs on a PC like everyone else, and that was in 28th of June 1993 when he was 87 years old.
Tommy's only public recognition was to have a road and an IT centre named after him in his native East End. The centre has since been closed.
At the end of the war, Flowers got a Leading Inventors Award for his war work, and this carried the monetary reward of £1,000, which was quite a lot of money in those days, of course. But Flowers being Flowers, he shared it with his men, and so by the time he'd done that, he got about 350 quid for inventing the first electronic computer.
Tommy died aged 92 in 1998. and Bill 4 years later, aged 84. Bill Tutt's memorial is a simple headstone in a rural Canadian cemetery and a lifetime of academic achievement. Tommy's is slightly different.
My father was cremated and the ashes scattered at the crematorium, but I think he would have recognised that his main memorial is at Bletchley Park in the reconstituted Colossus. I mean, as an engineer, to have a working machine as your memorial is the ideal thing, really.
Hitler ordered this machine himself that should never ever have been broken. But the minds at Bletchley Park managed to find ways of breaking it. And this is an amazing triumph of mind over machines.
Discover how a team of dedicated factory workers built a Wellington bomber from scratch over on BBC 2 at 11:20 tonight. And coming up next...